All right, we have one last piece of evidence for evolution, for supporting evolution. And this is probably the strongest piece of evidence that we have, and that's similarities in DNA. So it says all living things on Earth use DNA, which is deciphered using the same genetic code. And we've been through that genetic code, right? We've looked at the nitrogenous base sequences of thymines and adenines and guanines and cytosines and how information is encoded using those nitrogenous bases. We've transcribed it into messenger RNA sequences and then seen how the amino acids line up based upon the codons in the messenger RNA strand. And you've seen the codon table, where there's several codons that code for an amino acid. And so that coding is used by all organisms, all living things. And we take advantage of this all the time. So, for instance, insulin. Insulin is produced by bacteria. So let me make this a little bit more clear. Human insulin is made by bacteria. How does bacteria know how to make human insulin? Well, we've inserted the gene into bacteria so that they have the instructions on how to make human insulin. And then the bacteria reads the gene, makes the RNA strand, has the codon sequences, and then builds the polypeptide chain, right? Starts building one amino acid after, now they're tacking it on based upon the codons that it received in the gene that we've inserted into it, and it's able to make human insulin. So we can grow vats and vats of bacteria that are all pumping out human insulin, and we no longer have to get insulin from humans to give to people who have diabetes, right? So this genetic code is universal. So how did they all get that genetic code? It's been passed on from one generation to the next. So this is an example of insulin, the gene for insulin from different organisms, and this is not the full gene that they're showing. All right, so it's comparing human insulin to chicken insulin, and they're showing differences in the similarities here. So here they're showing that 240 out of 333 of the nucleotides are identical. So 72% similarity between human and chicken insulin here. So they're showing that there are differences, right? Because differences do accumulate over time. Human and mouse. So here we have two mammals. So there's 276 out of 333, so an 83% similarity. So humans and mice shared a more recent ancestor, a mammalian ancestor, as compared to humans and chickens, which shared an ancestor a much longer time ago, right? Much more in the past than the mammalian ancestor. So therefore, more changes could have accumulated over time. Then we compare humans and chimpanzees, all right, and we see that 328 out of 333 are identical nucleotides. So where it's a 98.4% sequence similarity, right, showing that we share a much more recent ancestor compared to humans and the mice, right? So sequence similarity, right, can show us how closely related two DNA molecules are to each other and potentially the relationships in ancestry there. So that's our evidence of evolution, right? From our first slide, we showed all those different levels. We talked about embryology, biogeography, sharing of similar characteristics, and direct observation. So let's see how much of this you understood. All right, so we've got a question here. It says there are animals that have DNA sequences for genes for some of the same proteins as humans do. And what does this suggest? Does it suggest that long ago these animals crossbred with humans, and therefore that's how they got those genes? Or that humans and these animals evolved via common descent from a common ancestor? Or nothing, it's just a coincidence. Not to worry about it. All right, so hopefully you're choosing B as your answer here, that humans and these animals inherited these DNA sequences. All right, they were passed on from one generation to the next. All right, how about this one? Which of the following is not evidence for evolution by natural selection? So not, we're looking for the not statement. So which one's false? So during the Industrial Revolution, black soot from coal burning smokestacks covered surfaces, including trees. Over generations, the population of mostly white-colored peppered moths became mostly dark-colored peppered moths. So we talked about this one, right? So the black soot covered the trees. It's saying the white-colored moths became dark. We know that's true. How about B? After Doug completed a course of antibiotic methicillin for an infection, he was hospitalized with MRSA, which is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus infection. All right, so we're looking for one that doesn't show evolution. So this one's talking about bacteria becoming more resistant to antibiotics. So if you remember in the direct observation, we were talking about that example of bacteria becoming much more resistant to antibiotics. So that doesn't look good. C, the agricultural industry has developed varieties of tomatoes with characteristics such as large size, uniform red coloration, and roundness. All right, so tomatoes, the characteristics of tomatoes have changed. All right, so it says the agricultural industry, so it's things that we are growing. So let's kind of come back to that because that's looking a bit like artificial selection, right? And we're looking for evidence for evolution by natural selection. How about many farmers view morning glories as a weed? 2 decades ago, the herbicide Roundup could be used to kill them, and today, morning glories survive despite being sprayed with Roundup. So that's our direct observation again. We talked about that, right? We talked about plants becoming more resistant to herbicides. So we see that occurring over generations, right? More and more of them are spreading on that successful characteristic, right? If they're not killed by the Roundup, they get to reproduce, right? They get to produce seeds. So we're liking C as our answer, all right? That the agricultural industry has developed varieties of tomatoes with special characteristics that we like. We like them to be large. We like them to be red, okay? So C is our incorrect response. All right, next we say if a homologous trait is no longer useful in a specific organism, then it is referred to scientifically by what term? Is it vestigial, analogous, adaptive, or transitional? All right, so hopefully the one that kind of stands out that we talked about is vestigial. All right, so a trait that's no longer useful in that organism would deem to be vestigial. All right, hopefully you were successful in getting these answers. If not, listen to the video again.